get there. So let's now join Terence McKenna and a small group of workshop attendees for a Sunday morning wrap-up session that took place during the month of May in 1990.
What I thought we would do this morning, because these things are so brief, is again return to the form of going around in a circle. And this time it's your last chance to ask a question, make a statement, voice a complaint, whatever you want to do, but just to try and, in other words, it's loose ends time, as rapidly as we can, to tie up loose ends, things people didn't understand, people feel they need to hear more about, that sort of thing. And why don't we just start as we did before, this side and go around.
More satisfactory explanation of what archaic revival means. I haven't got it straightened out. I suspect it means a return to a more stable state when there's too much chaos in the present. I'm sure that's not what we mean.
Well, that's partially what it is. It's based on the idea that when societies get into trouble, an unconscious response seems to be they search back through their own history to find a model that they can revivify or revitalize. The strongest example in our own history was when the medieval world broke apart and didn't make any sense anymore. The new middle class went back to classicism, to the Greeks and the Romans, to Roman law, Greek philosophy, and Greco-Roman architecture and mechanics and that sort of thing, and created classicism. Classicism was invented in the 14th century. But our problems are deeper than this. We can't go back to ancient Rome or ancient Egypt or something like that and expect to have real answers. We have to go back further to prehistory, to this archaic state, and there, in partnership, in genderless, self-organizing society, we begin to see the kinds of models that we have to somehow recreate in the modern world. Obviously, we can't in the modern world become mushroom-eating nomadic pastoralists, but we can study that approach to reality to try and learn from it how you live in equilibrium. That's the key thing that the archaic world knew that we don't know. How do you live in equilibrium so that your children may live in equilibrium? Because otherwise you get a cycle started that's going to shove somebody over the cliff. And that somebody, in the present case, is either ourselves, our children, or their children. It's no further away in time than that. So the archaic revival is the idea that all of and I see the whole of the 20th century, the discovery of the unconscious by Freud and Jung, the dissolving of the naturalistic image at the hands of the Cubists, the probing of the dream state by the Surrealists, the exploration of mass ritual by the fascists. I mean, it wasn't all good, this stuff. But what all these things had in common was they were a return, an appeal to a level of the mass psyche that had been ignored and denied for a long, long time. The LSD taking of the 60s was the same kind of thing. And, I come out pretty strongly from McLuhan in the idea that as the emphasis, as the ratios of the mix of media in a society changes, the sensory ratios and values of the society change. And we're living in a post-literate, post-linear kind of world now. where a whole different set of assumptions make sense, and they're archaic assumptions. The archaic world was a non-linear, pre-literate, audial, all at once kind of world, and the fact that our sensory ratios have shifted back in that direction makes us very sympathetic, very susceptible to this re-archaicization that wants to go on.
I guess the ultimate philosophical question is can you envision, Terence, in your wildest imagination, that we as a society, instead of individuals taking mushrooms and gaining some enlightenment, that we will never get organized mass way? Do you have that vision?
You mean that someday it will be legal?
Legal and encouraged mass taking?
Well, obviously it would take a total revolution. The current thinking is that the big revolutions in the world have to do with the internal contradictions of Marxist-Leninism. But it may actually be that Marxist-Leninism was a kind of partner in a codependent relationship with consumer capitalism. And maybe revolution is just going to become something that everybody is into. God knows, we could use a perestroika. I mean, we too are ruled by constipated, lying bureaucrats who, what are the statistics that 97% of all incumbents are re-elected, that there is less turnover in the United States Congress than there was in the higher echelons of the Communist Party of East Germany until the wall came down. I mean, we love to congratulate ourselves on the forward-leaning liberal society that we live in, and the truth is, it's a bunch of rattlesnake-handling fundamentalists that are much closer to Stalin than they are to FDR or anybody else like that. Still, I think that the culture crisis is going to become so intense, and the world is going to become so weird, as we saw on the graph last night. Novelty is going to intensify and intensify and intensify, and even last year when Eastern Europe was falling to pieces, very straight people were saying, gee, it seems as though history itself is accelerating. Well, then there was a lull, so that talk was dropped. But I think history is accelerating, and the next time it accelerates, the talk that this is happening will come around again much louder. And pretty soon, by the turn of the century, I think it's going to be hard to hide from anybody who's paying attention the fact that the entire social evolution of the planet seems to be caught in some kind of evolutionary meltdown that is imminent. And in that environment, psilocybin has a chance. The whole drug thing, leave alone psychedelics, the whole drug thing is properly understood as a civil rights issue. I mean, people should be able to take whatever drugs they damn well please, in the same way that they should be able to express their sexual preferences, in the same way that women should be allowed to vote. People of low incidence of light reflectivity should be treated like everybody else. And all these things which are perfectly obvious. You cannot have a free society and regulate people's drug use. Any society which sets out to call itself free and democratic with the footnote that certain states of mind are forbidden is headed down the slippery slopes of totalitarianism. There ain't no way this can be avoided. So, aside from our belief as a group in the wonderful healing and teaching potential of psychedelics, even if psychedelic drugs didn't exist, I would favor the legalization of all drugs, because I just think that you cannot treat people as though they were infantile. That's called paternalism. That's the old dominator game. We have to just admit that we're all in this together, and that nobody has cornered the market on the truth, for sure. This is to my mind, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow of the psychedelic experience. These experiences get stronger and stronger and stronger, and then language becomes visible. And then if they become any stronger, you fall asleep. That seems to be about the outer limit of what the internal processors can tolerate. Seeing language, it's a mystery, it's a miracle, I don't know what it is. It's the thing which keeps me going with all of this, because it's the idea that we're just on the brink of some kind of transformation in how we communicate with each other that will change not only how we communicate, but who we are. Because if you could see what I mean rather than hear me, run to your internal dictionary and look up all my words and reconstruct my meaning. But if you could just see what I mean, then you and I would be very much like the same person, because we would be looking at the same thing. So it's a tremendous, obviously language is what has knitted us together and made us social creatures. I mean, creatures of our body weight and so forth have styles where, the males and the females get together only for sex and once a year, like mountain lions or something like that. So, but obviously the presence of language and our social history as primates set us up for living as we do. And we have managed to create, through language, a monkey troop of 5 billion people. A monkey troop of 5 billion individuals united through the glue of language. So it's an intensification, and it's something shamans do. And I think it's the real social magic of shamanism, at least in the Amazon, is based around these visible communication.
I wanted to make a comment about the difference between seeing and hearing. It's like the difference between sculpture and music. Music and language take place in succession of elements through time, so it requires a duration to understand. But sculpture and seeing things, it's all in a single moment. But at least with sculpture, that the objects beheld in a single moment. The aesthetics of an object, a sculptured object, is the relationship of art the world in a single moment. Music is this succession of elements. Somehow I think that relates to the thing. When you talk about seeing language, you're almost like seeing, when you're talking about seeing little creatures, the words being creatures, and so then you're observing these creatures. Are they coming out like music through time, or can an idea, a sentence be seen all at once?
They're coming out through time, and a sentence can be seen all at once, because in a way your analogy is not apt, because sculpture is static, but these visible statements are like sculpture made of some magical substance which has an internalized program of change. The analogy I always make is to the eggs of Fabergé. These things are like machines, jewels, but you can also tell while you're looking at them that they're statements. They're like, you know how people talk about beautifully crafted sentences? Well, these are beautifully crafted sentences, but they're like exquisite, interlocking, mechanized things made out of ivory and glass and topaz and chrome, and and they're carrying on at a furious rate. They have a life in time. I would like to write a computer program that would be like a full paint type program, but it would be for the purpose of generating these kinds of objects, because I've seen them a fair bit and analyzed what's going on, and here's how it works. You have a dodecahedron or some other complex regular polygon, so that it's made of surfaces. And then to each surface you assign a set of color and frequency changes. And then each surface can run its program independent of all the other surfaces. So you slowly build up a program on each surface, but then you can also cut into this polygon and remove chunks of it to reveal another polygon inside it that can have different programs written for each of its surfaces. And then you set these things slowly rotating one within another on several levels, and you're beginning to approach a really shoddy example of what these things are like you see in space. Beats me. Most of this stuff is repertoire.
I've heard you speak often about these incredibly complex images that you received on psilocybin and EMT. I'm just wondering if you've ever had an experience of total emptiness or awakeness. The most profound experience I've ever had in psilocybin was actually being void of any content at all, but not being blanked out or something like that, just aware.
Well, I think this may have something to do with philosophical bent and proclivity. I never got any of these Zenning states. The white light, the black light, and it's probably in my personality. I really stress visual hallucinations, and people have hassled me about this and said, but psychedelics open your heart, they do this, they do that, and all you ever talk about is visions. It's because, to me, the vision is the proof, and I guess I'm still a skeptic after all these years, the vision is the proof that it's not me. Because if I've never seen it before, hell, I'm willing to grant it's not me. If I've never seen it before, how difficult a character do you have to be? So when there's these things I've never seen before that are absolutely amazing, streaming past my closed eyelids, I have to grant that it isn't coming from me, and that thin thread can be the basis of a bridge to fate. If it isn't me, then there's something out there. God, the devil, who knows? But at least somebody. Now we can begin to have a serious spiritual quest. There is a signal. We're getting a signal from the other, and it can be pursued. But it's the task of a life.
Now I hear you mention faith. It seems like yesterday morning you said something along the line of, I'm not a believer in any sense of the word. But what I wanted to ask you is, in the context of the chemicals in the brain, pineal gland and so forth, what do you think of fasting as a way of altering consciousness?
Fasting, I think, is probably very effective. If you analyze this whole rap here about the early mushrooms and the primates and all that, really what's being said is that diet is the key, that foods are very important. And this is what they're saying about ayahuasca in the Amazon. They say half of it is ayahuasca, but the learning of the shamanism and the becoming of this superhuman type of personality is all in the diet. And shamans in the Amazon, when they're trying to establish their credentials with each other, do it by saying how long they kept the diet. Or people say, well, I did it for 2 years.
I just want to say something about the shamans in the Amazon. This magic phlegm that they bring up?
Right.
What do they do with it? Do they spit it out finally and swallow it back down?
What do they ultimately do with it?
Yeah.
It's hard to find out stuff like this when you're a guest. I don't know. I didn't see where it went.
Did you see it?
I've seen it.
Because if they use this to pull a disease out of something, or to poison, or some kind of illness-causing thing, if it's like a magnet that pulls this out,
right.
then if they just keep this inside of them, that would be very safe.
Well, talking about what it is and judging whether it's safe or not, what is this plant in the first place? I mean, when you're really there, really dealing with it, you're pushed toward ideas like that it's a zone of space-time which repels English. You know, I mean, in other words, it's a magical substance. It comes out of their body. Calling it phlegm is because we're following some anthropologist in the 1920s who, you know, went back to his tent, scratching his head, and tried to figure out what the nearest analogy to this was. But what they do is they also, in some of these tribes, the story goes that they can force this stuff out on the surface of their skin. And I don't know what this is about, but I have had ayahuasca visions where it's like a black field and suddenly there's a huge, huge black hand. And I can see in the lines of this hand jewels. And it's just there, this black hand. It's not my hand, it's a black hand.
Where does it come from? I mean, is it on your hand?
No, it's like in a vision, and then I see in the lines that this, what I thought were jewels, is some kind of sweat, which is seeping out. And you look deeper into this stuff, and you see, you know, that wonderful line from 2001. My God, there are stars in here, and it's completely disarming. No, the magic is real. I have no idea how far it can go. I mean, one of the paradoxes of what we're doing here in this room is, you know, here I sit. I have 2 children, a wife, a mortgage, book contracts, lawyer, all this. Here you sit with whatever you brought to this. And we're talking about this stuff. If any one of us cared to, we could turn ourselves into something that none of the rest of us could relate to at all. We could become a sage. You could go up onto Cold Mountain, and those of us left down in the valley would say, oh yes, I saw him 3 years ago up in the mist, naked as a jaybird, hauling firewood out of the woods. These places, there's no barrier between you and these places. Except is that what you want? You know, do you want to become utterly incomprehensible to the community because you are so deep into the unspeakable? Maybe. And that's what a shaman is. A shaman is somebody who's just on the edge. They just have one finger back in the world of the rest of us. And then they're in the stuff. Well, seeking that used to be called the spiritual quest. But as I said to you, we found the means to do that. We found the answer. You know, you just go and live in the wilderness and take mushrooms and, you know, koham and move over. But what to do with that? I don't know. I mean, I really don't know because I'm attracted to it. I want to go as far as I can go. But when you realize that you can go so far that nobody will even remember that you ever existed, the other can close over you so utterly.
The reason I ask is because a lot of times they say that, you know, that gurus and different people take on the karma of the people that they heal or they work with. You know, I've probably heard this theory before. And so I wondered when these shamans were healing, that if they magnetized out some kind of illness or something, where does that go?
Well, they have, yes, they're very concerned about the power of this illness, and they have techniques, and many times after a big curing, shaman will fall sick. And, you know, if you want to understand this, read Jung's book called On the Psychology of the Transference. It's the same in all cultures. You must be able to turn back the transference if you're a healer. Otherwise, you'll be killed, ultimately. And all psychiatrists, psychotherapists understand this. Or if they don't, they're at great peril.
Did anyone happen to see a film called From Beyond? And the premise was that there was a machine that induced visions into the spiritual realm and stimulated the pineal gland. And what happens is a couple of people, the inventor and someone else, got hooked on the machine, and the pineal gland started growing out of their forehead.
Hollywood.
It was big on special effects.
Oh,
and the one guy, his whole body was just like totally transformed. And he was always on this machine. So it reminded me of what you're kind of a electronic artificial version of.
Yeah, well, this is also coming. Artificial technologies. Where are we in this process? Yeah.
I'm quite satisfied with the question. Commenting on that with respect to the pineal gland visions, the pineal gland feeds directly from the ocular nerve. No interceding brain tissue. It's just a direct connection. So the colors that one takes in are directly responsible for the particular secretions in that gland, which is one of the reasons why television is described as being difficult on people. It causes real hormonal problems if you watch it enough, because we're dealing with a very restricted spectrum of colors, that sort of thing. The additional thought occurred to me that everyone who's watching television at the same time, their nervous system is being pulsed 30 times a second, even though they're not conscious of it. But every TV set in the whole United States is exactly in sync with each other, all at 30 times a second. It's like this sub-audible dial tone that's going through everyone's brains, which is kind of an ominous tone to me. The one comment I wanted to make was having recently read a book by Gurdjieff called Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, which is about the only book I've ever read that even pertains to the sort of cosmic timescale that Terence talks about. And one of the warnings in the beginning of the book was that if you read this with enough attention, you'll eventually lose the taste for your favorite dessert, and the particularly attractive person across the street that you like to watch won't seem nearly so interesting anymore. So be forewarned, you may not want to read this stuff. And to a certain extent, I feel that's quite possible.
I think the cosmic view kills the trivial, the joy of trivia.
Curse of mysticism.
Well, I don't know. Your thing about television and everybody being in sync, one of the most creative and eccentric explanations ever dreamed up for flying saucers rested on the fact that the guy said in the United States, on an average evening, 40 million people are all in sync watching TV. And if there then is a storm on the sun, it acts as a kind of coherent energy beam which illuminates these millions of psyches that are all synchronized by watching television, and it causes an image of an archetype to be projected into space on the other side of the planet. Not my theory.
Well, definitely in image processing, when you want to, computer image processing, when you want to draw a very fuzzy sort of pattern, quite often what you do is interfere with that another regular pattern on top of it, and see how these two patterns commingle, so that you'll get an accentuated thing as a result. This 30 hertz dial tone is definitely sort of illuminating this other aspect of the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
You ever read A Wrinkle in Time? Have you read that?
No.
Read A Wrinkle in Time. It's a special children's story. It's almost exactly what you said.
By
yeah. It's almost exactly what you said.
Back there.
I'm interested in what you feel your relationship is with these psychometry. Are we offspring somehow?
Well, I don't know. I mean, this has puzzled me for a long, long time. When it first happened, I just thought that they were straight out extraterrestrials, and that this was some kind of weird technology where this was a contact between a species that evolved off planet, and then, but they're like they're interdimensional dwellers of some sort, and so then I thought, well, maybe they're just hyperspatial creatures of some sort in some other dimension that I can't even imagine. And then I thought, maybe they're actually from the future. It's like maybe this is a future state of humanity, that we're actually going to look like this in 10 million years, and they're doing some kind of weird experiment with time, and I'm the Neanderthal that they're checking out. And then the other possibility, which I mentioned here, which is really unsettling, but in a lot of ways fills the bill better than any of these, which is their souls of some sort. They're human beings. And when you try that on for size, it's pretty hair-raising, because it feels right, and yet your mind boggles, and I am not ready to believe that you can smoke a drug and cross over the Great Divide and return 10 minutes later. That really strains my credulity. Nevertheless, if you ask shamans, this is what they would say. After having many DMT trips, I came to realize that this place that you break into, where the gnomes greet you with this huge array, and all this linguistic machinery is happening and so forth, that alien as that place is, it's somebody's idea of a reassuring environment for a human being. It's somebody's idea of the equivalent of a playpen. And these colored machine linguistic object things are the equivalent of colored rattles and things strung on a string. And you're just sitting there, gaping. And they're saying, don't freak out, pay attention, learn to do this. I don't know. Maybe, first of all, nothing is impossible. No possible speculation is forbidden, right? So maybe it is that we've gone too far. And maybe it is that this planet is doomed. And maybe it is that somehow that too is part of the plan. Borges had this idea. He said that he believed in what he called the soul of the species. And he said the soul of the species is not released into the higher dimensions until the last individual member of the species dies. As long as there is a single member of the species alive, the soul of the species is somehow in some kind of transient zone. But when the last member of a species died, then it goes off. Well, if you look at the fossil record, 95% of all the species that have ever lived on the Earth are extinct. From that point of view, it looks as though biology is a process for producing extinction. Well, then what is it? Is it that in the world of three-dimensional space and time and matter and energy, the DNA rears a form which inhabits a region of time and space called the body, and then at a certain point, this form withdraws into something, and what the matter that it had previously organized just falls to pieces. I don't know, but the entities in the DMT place are a real challenge. They either are the dead, extraterrestrials, or interdimensional dwellers. Any one of these is a headline in the supermarket checkout list, I assure you. Yeah.
But I did recently have a dream that we were all linked together.
seemed like you had the same experience. I'm not sure. To know if you had that in relationship to affecting others. I mean,
Well, I think that, the link that we cannot evolve, we can't change the world any faster than we can change the language we use to talk about. And changing language is a collective activity. You empower means. I talked about this, and you create a concept, and then you empower it by spreading it, and by communicating it clearly enough that in the act of spreading it, it doesn't get badly copied and get all mushed up, so that after it's been copied 10 times, you can't recognize it. I mean, I sometimes have this experience. People quote me to myself, and I'm just amazed, And sometimes it turns out it's verbatim, and I'm still amazed. But the linking together is through the evolution of language, and we've never, ever attempted to engineer language. We've always let it just grow like topsy, not realizing that certain language habits are very toxic. Certain language patterns give permission for very detrimental ways of thinking. I mean, for instance, the subject-object relationship in English, or the assignment of gender to things, and it goes on in a lot of languages. These are habits of language that then become tremendous social problems for their inheritors. Yes, or the I. I mean, there are languages where there isn't first-person pronoun. The only way you can refer to yourself is by the extremely clumsy form, this person. This person thinks. Yeah.
I was curious. You mentioned DMT and visions of, I think you said dodecahedrons and things like that. And then you mentioned they're saying to you to kind of stay with it and just hang in there. I'm kind of curious about this dialogue between the logos and psilocybin. I mean, do they sound the same? Is it, how do you know that it's just not your own Howard Cosell commenting in the back of your mind?
How do you know it isn't your own mind?
Yeah, and is there a way to break through to begin a dialogue, or does it just start going like a tape loop?
No, it doesn't start going. You have to invoke it. This is an interesting thing if you're practically inclined. It won't speak to you. You have to speak to it. And you come into a certain place on the mushroom, which I now, based on having done it a number of times, recognize the territory and say, aha, it's now possible to communicate with the thing. And then you must know the old I Love Lucy episode where they do the thing about come in, little green men, come in, little green men. Ethel and Lucy are into this. Well, I tried that, and, you hear this thing, which sounds like the tinkling of bells, the distant tinkling of bells. And what it is it's literally, it's the elf troop, or the elf troop marching band and chowder society. And you can hear them getting nearer and nearer. It's like, and it gets louder and louder, and at a certain point you begin not to hear it, but to see it, and it gets brighter and brighter and clearer, and finally they're all around you and jumping up and down and saying, how do you like it, McKinney, and all this other stuff that they say, and they're gnomes. I mean, they couldn't miss it. And I'm still me, of course. I'm still just as I would be sitting here. And it's so hard to assimilate. That's why I say, sitting here in a room talking about this stuff is nothing as to being out there signing treaties with folks. It's
That to me is what may be part of following a little bit of the question. When you say logos, is this the machine elves? Are they the logos?
no,
Terrence, we have something.
no. The logos is something a little subtler that is that's actually stuck with me ever since La Chirera. It's just a quality of thinking that I recognize to be clearer and deeper than my own. And it usually takes the form of, why don't you try this with regard to some problem? Why don't you try this? And I know immediately it'll work. It's got the tone. That's the real thing. I just go and do it, and it always works. And it's these evolved ideas.
Okay, so I can understand that that's your subjective experience. And some people don't get the machine elves and things like that talks to. But you mentioned the mark of this was terror. So I mean, I can already realize that being in that domain is enough of a terror in itself. But you said the mark of or the proof of this was the trip. Some of these trips were terrorizing for you. But I'm trying to understand. There must be something else going on there that's enabling you to feel terror or.
It's the implications are what's terrifying. Because you know that amazing moment in Rosemary's Baby where she's in the dream and then she sits up and she says, "My God, this is really happening." Well, that happens to you in the DMT thing. You realize at the center of it, this is not a drug. That's preposterous. A drug? Are you kidding me? Drugs make you feel good or bad or fall down or disgrace yourself. This is not a drug. It's something masquerading as a drug. I mean, it's as appalling as if they were about to give you the umbilical examination that Whitley Strieber specializes in. I mean, you're inside a flying saucer. You're with things that in a moment before you would have laughed at the possibility that they even existed, and now you're there, and you feel completely normal. You don't feel drugged, or dulled, or distanced, or high, or low. You just feel stoned, amazed at what has happened to reality and how it's all been replaced by this thing that not only did you never suspect its existence, but nobody ever suspected its existence. You talk about a well-kept secret that's only 2 tokes away. How do they keep the lid on this? That's the miracle to me. How do they keep the lid on this? Well, they haven't.
Well, I'm not sure what my question is, but in the experience last night with the computer time program, that was real exciting to me. It kind of made me almost have the experience of traveling through time and having that awareness of history. And wondering now that you brought that out and we have the awareness, what do we really use it for? I mean, what is your vision for how it can truly be used? And
if you understand history, you will see it in the present. It's an amazing tool for enriching your own experience. If you when you go to get a hamburger at Hadrian's hamburger joint, know that this is happening because you're caught in a resonance related to the expeditions of the Roman Emperor Hadrian to Scotland. I mean, you're totally schizophrenic, of course, to entertain thoughts like this, but it makes life a lot more interesting. You, instead of seeing a linear thing with a fading past and an unpredictable future, you live in a super rich kind of baklava style of time, where time is folded and folded and folded, and the layers are very thin, and the stuff between is very sweet.
Well, how have you used that personally in your life?
Well, the other way you use it is, of course, it predicts the future. We saw the line going off into the future. Well, I've had it in my possession since 1972. So after you've watched it correctly predict the future for a while, months or years, however long it takes, you gain confidence in it. And as you gain confidence in it, you discovered that it gives you permission to let go of anxiety about the future. You've got a map of the future. You know that August 91 is going to be a pain in the ass. You know that great triumph will come to you in January of 93, so why worry about it? You just then go and live your life, and as you watch the wave unfold, confidence grows and grows and grows, and what's happening, you see, is without any fanfare or, alien symbiosis, you're becoming a hyperspatial person. You're adding a dimension to your view of the world. The future is changing from a question mark into a map that you're quite confident is working for. And anxiety about the future is a major thing twisting people around. So if you could get agreement on this, it's the Tao, Live in the perception of the Tao. It's just people didn't ever think that would mean you'd go and look at a printed output from a computer. But the exhortation is the same. Live according to the constraints of the Tao.
King Boss is the same.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed this weekend. It's really given me much food for thought. Eons and eons of years from now even. And I'm very interested in what the best setup is for taking the mushrooms. The amount and time of day, condition, whatever. I think there must be, in your experience, I'm sure you've tried all of them, there must be a one way that is perhaps lends itself better to the mushroom than others.
How do you get into the truth?
Yes. Well, yes, I haven't said it this weekend, but it's practically a battle cry of mine. It's 5 grams in silent darkness on an empty stomach. And I'll explain it, 5 grams. Now, when you must weigh it, a lot of people take mushrooms, and when you show them what 5 grams is, they pale visibly. Because, 5 dried grams. And it's, several mouthfuls. So, and I'm speaking for a 145-pound person. Obviously, if you weigh 90 pounds, you back it up a little. And if you weigh 230, you might go a little up. But 5 dried grams on an empty stomach, all that means is don't eat for 6 hours. Silent darkness. Silent. And a lot of people disagree with me about this, and they want to listen to the Moody Blues, and they want Bach, and they want this. Forget it. Nobody's going to listen to you if you come out of this experience saying Johann Sebastian Bach is God. We know that. So, and it's very confusing because the music becomes everything if you listen to it. I mean, you cannot separate it from the trip, and people will not believe